On this episode, I go in the startup van.
Yeah.
I'm like, this looks cool. This looks good.
Great.
And it was enough to make me say, let's do it.
Hey everybody, I'm Hussey and I'm the founder of Dream Factory.
I want to figure out how this boy from Dublin ends up being interviewed about his successes.
They paid him like 150,000 euros to speak, and then we got him free for longer. So they paid corporate spend tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions on marketing to be known. And then they send in me with a van. And if anyone wants a lesson in building a brand, that's it.
It sounds very ahead of its time.
Yeah, it was. Why all the time? I spoke to hundreds of founders. Taking other people's money, have to be sure, right? And ended up speaking to a VC, one of the largest VCs in Europe. Yeah, it was 136K.
I was shocked at first because
But you know what's crazy? That just like sums up.
I feel like a failure.
That sums up how mad the mind used to lay awake at night going, I've messed that up. You get that second punch in the face. That's not happening.
Wow.
Yeah.
I am so excited for you to listen to this episode where I interviewed Graham Hussey, the founder and CEO of Dream Factory, which at the time of recording has 350 members and counting, 2 locations around London, multiple revenue streams. Graham has been so kind in openly sharing his journey of what got him from A to B. We break down all practical elements of what it takes to build a business, from pricing and culture through to fundraising. He shares why he turned down VC funding, which is an interesting one, so stick around for that. Plus, what GaryVee is really like off camera. Stay tuned, I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you do, please hit that subscribe button, it really helps me out. Graham,
Hey.
it is such a pleasure to have you and your Dublin accent on the Strategy and Tragedy podcast. It's wonderful to have him to interview you in your own studio, in your own company. This is wonderful. This must feel very meta for you.
Yeah, it does.
Being on the other side of the table, you're the one interviewing others.
I
How does
haven't
it feel?
I haven't done a lot of this, which will probably be evident by the end of this, but I haven't actually featured a lot on other people's things.
You need the practice. This
Yeah,
is really
I
a
do.
charity.
Yeah,
It
I
pays up to
appreciate
it
it.
for you. So, first question, the $1 million question I think everyone wants to know from you. What was it like to meet GaryVee?
It was a bit of a whirlwind, right? I didn't know who he was, 72 hours before we filmed with him, which I think it was GaryVee was I think he's less relevant today, but he was really relevant then. He was a superstar. And I think everyone thought we knew him a long time and we were grafting to get him in. And reality is 72 hours before, I didn't know who he was. And a friend of mine said he was coming to Dublin, and I was like, I don't care because I don't know who it is. And they said, no, you really should check out videos. So I basically binged watched his videos, like nonstop, just YouTube playlist. And we just dropped a DM to his videographer. His videographer said yes, and he, we had to kind of try a bit, but it wasn't that hard. And then meeting him was a strange thing because obviously he had done Dublin Tech Summit, and they paid him, I don't know if I said it before, but they paid him like 150,000 euros to speak, and then we got him free for longer. So they hate me. But when he got in, it was just very, energetic, and the way GaryVee is, it was exactly as you'd expect. But then when the cameras turn off, he's just like, obviously busy dude. He's on his emails going through. And then a couple of days later, that episode was released. And I need to see if I find a clip of this, but the episode was released. It looked great. We got loads of followers and loads of emails, and you should come to Atlanta, you should come to Chicago, you should come to New York, and which is really cool US exposure. And then he released another video after it and referred to something about being in a creepy van or something like that. So he kind of did us in a few videos in. But it was cool meeting him, but not all that great either, right? I think he was just kind of in the zone, quiet on his phone.
Right. And I guess what you saw on camera is what you experienced during those few
because
minutes.
the cameras are on.
Yeah.
Right. So I got like full GaryVee experience because the cameras are rolling at all times. But the deal was we interview him, but we'd also give him a ride to the airport.
Yeah.
So the ride to the airport, I think there's clips of it online.
Yeah.
We were like maybe sneakily recording. but those clips online of him just, on his phone. But he must have responded to 300 emails in like 40 minutes, like on his phone beside me. It was crazy.
Amazing. So it was kind of very much, he's on when he's on and he's off when he's off.
Time.
Sort of saw that switch with him.
Because there's no way, there's no way without hard drugs that someone is that energetic all the time. Yeah. And I seen the very different, like night and day different. But you have to be. Energy conservation as soon as the camera goes off, I think, is the thing. But it was huge. It was, at the time, it was huge for us. It was right at peak of his popularity, and it boosted our popularity. That's the name of the game, right?
So, as context for anyone who didn't already know, Graham, founder previously of the Startup Van, which was huge, especially in the startup ecosystem. I'd definitely heard of it before I ever met you, and you have this fantastic story about how you hustled to get GaryVee onto your creepy murder vibes startup van, your words, not mine. And achieved it, and hadn't even heard of him 72 hours beforehand, which I was shocked at first because I am an ex. I'm a recovering GaryVee diehard fan. I've since graduated and come to my senses. But to be fair, because this was like 7 years ago, he was probably just coming into my consciousness back then as well. So I don't think you were the only one. I think, as you say, it was the peak of his fame. And I just have to say, I laughed so much when I was watching it, especially at the beginning, because it's kind of like OG GaryVee from like almost a decade ago, with that energy, with everything he's bred. It's like
pre-crypto.
It was almost that sort of era where it's almost a caricature of himself. So it does explain it, that there's kind of that on-off that you experienced. So what he talked about in that video, and I do encourage listeners to go and watch the clip, it's hilarious. He talked about leveraging getting him on as a guest to then secure other high-profile name guests. Did you manage to succeed in doing that? Did you get any other amazing guests after GaryVee, or was GaryVee the peak?
GaryVee wasn't my favorite, right? I think probably following wise, he's definitely the most. But we had Tom Blomfield, who co-founded Monzo, Michael Acton-Smith from Calm, these big founders on, because obviously we just leverage it. But to be honest, the most important thing, I think people who create content for startups, for businesses, always miss the point, is yes, you can get big guests on, but paying the bills is more important, because if you don't pay the bills, there's nowhere for the guests to sit, right? So we didn't so much leverage GaryVee for guests, we leveraged GaryVee for cash, right? So we would, basically all day and all night cold outreaching conferences all around the world. Hey, we've interviewed the likes of Gary Vaynerchuk. Here's the clip, because obviously got loads of views. Here's the clip. We want to interview founders at your conference. Here's how much it is.
So was that how you were monetizing back then? Was getting the conferences to pay for you as like a media, a fresh media sort of?
So conferences, but more often than not, conferences are really tight on budget. So they'd say, hey, we can't afford it, but maybe some of our sponsors will be interested. And then we go to the sponsors, and basically, so it was, and I think we're the only, one of the only people who've, and especially in this side of the pond, actually managed to monetize and content and do it really well in that B2B space, for sure. Fantastic. I think everyone else just tries to do it for a bit and then, realizes how hard it is, realize not making money off it, and then fall off. Whereas we were like, we need to make money at this.
And I read about some of your big brand contracts as well. You were flying out to Chicago with Startup Van. That is so cool.
Yeah, that was the first trip we did. Yeah.
So what was that? Was that a brand deal?
That was with Sage, the accountancy software company.
So they sponsored you essentially to go around and do these interviews. Wow.
Yeah. So basically, there was no one, and I still don't think there's anyone better than me to do it. Not sound cocky, but to land in a city and in a really short space of time embed into an ecosystem, like a startup ecosystem. I think I've just done it in so many cities. I've done it in Europe, I've done it in Asia, I've done it in America, where you land in and it comes to a place of authenticity, right? I care about startups so much. Entrepreneurs are my heroes, right? As cheesy as that sounds, but I think it's, it's a really special thing to take a leap and do something for yourself. So landing in the city and being known in a startup ecosystem is something I'm shit at loads of things, but that's one thing I'm good at. So that's why brands would say, hey, we're having a conference in Chicago and barely any people know who we are as a brand. Can you go out for 3 weeks before the conference and change that? And if you think of corporate spend tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions on marketing to be known, and then they send in me with a van and a team 3 weeks before to do the same thing. So it really, really effective.
Do you remember the sort of value that they were paying you, you know, given that they were paying so much for these conferences? What was the sort of size of these contracts?
It was like 6-figure contracts.
So good for you, cheap for them.
Good for us, cheap for them.
Fantastic.
Perfect. And it's the exact same, we're looking at the Dream Factory, but it's the exact same principle here, right? It's like a Dream Factory, which I'm sure we get into, is a sustainable, profitable business. Also great for the members. So we've just landed. I think that's like my thing, right?
Good old-fashioned business, which we'll get into, because the recent ups and downs have definitely rebalanced the playing field. But yeah, more on that later. So just on the pricing side of things, because I think that this is something that would be really valuable for a lot of founders listening to as well, is, you know, pricing is a big struggle, especially at the beginning, trying to figure out how to price your services, how much value to add to a contract. You had that same struggle when one of these big brands came to you. Again, first time you're ever doing anything like this. I heard about a friend sort of said, no, go higher, and encouraged you to put a higher price. Tell us a bit more about that story and how you arrive at you know, your pricing strategies.
Yeah, when a multi-billion-dollar brand reaches out, I think early stage founder it's more about getting some cash than actually pausing for a sec and figuring it out, because you have runway to deal with, you have staff to pay. And when we first got the request to put in a bid to do something with Startup Fan, we just went, what's our yearly salary currently, and put that into the proposal, going, wow, imagine we got paid our year's salary to do something for 3 weeks. How cool would that be? And then we sent it to somebody that we knew who was from the agency world, who would do contracts and bids with big companies, and they basically said, you're delivering unbelievable value to this business at 10 times that, and their marketing budget is X amount of million, in the tens of millions, and you're charging them 40k. What are you doing? And kind of helped us reframe, because it's really hard to do it once you're used to a salary, and once you're used to certain amounts of money. It's just zeros being added for these big corporates, right? Maybe different now, but back then they're a little bit more loose with their checks back then. But yeah, it's just interesting to have a different point of view.
Yeah.
And it's something I say to founders all the time. It's like, you just ask questions. If you're unsure, because I may not be here today. I wouldn't be dead, I'm sure, but I wouldn't be here today because I would have went in at 40k to do this thing. In reality, shit went wrong in that first. Sorry, swearing. Stuff went wrong in that first shoot. And it cost us money to fix it. We lost hard drives, and we had to rebook this and rebook that.
Sure.
We would have lost money on it, and then we would have been like sending out our CVs to get full-time jobs again, versus doing it and having cash left over to give us time to do the next thing.
I think this is something that happens more frequently than we might expect. It's a story I've heard from, do you know Scott Galloway?
Yeah.
Is that ringing bells? He has a very similar story about when he learned, when he had his first opportunity to win a big contract, and he went through the same thought process, because as you say, you're so used to one way of thinking about money, and you're used to being employed and having a job. He went about pretty much the same way. It was a friend that was like, hang on a minute, that helped him to reframe. So it was like, oh my God, okay, let's go for it. And it always feels wrong or scary, and he just has this great story about when he got the check in the post, because this is obviously how long ago it was, and he just felt like he needed to be sent to jail or something, like he'd done something wrong. Like,
but it pops up all the time. It pops up all the time with people being asked to speak at conferences.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I know, people of color, female founders are getting asked to speak at conferences, and just, typical story of the GaryVees get paid £150,000, and then, female founder gets paid nothing to do it. And that always pops up. And it pops up for me to get asked to do stuff, and you kind of have to weigh up. You have to pause for a second, because yes, you can ask for $5,000, and they may say no, they may say yes, but also what's it worth to you as well to do that? That's
a great example of the public speaking situation, because I think it's when you take anything that isn't tangible, where it's like, well, I haven't got my eggs and flour and the kitchen I need to rent to kind of maybe produce a physical product, when it's like, it's a speech that I'm delivering, or it's something that's maybe less tangible. It's a little bit more kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Nebulous.
Yeah, for sure.
But anyway, so you mentioned before about your heroes being entrepreneurs, which I love.
Yeah.
So rewinding the clock a little bit then. So I want to figure out how this boy from Dublin ends up being interviewed about his successes in his own studio in the best city in the world, Dublin. So obviously you've had multiple ventures, serial entrepreneur. You've obviously got an entrepreneurial streak to you. So did you grow up with that influence around you, your parents entrepreneurs, or who did you look up to? Let's kind of take the clock back a little bit.
Yeah, I think I don't think entrepreneurship runs in people's blood, right? I know people have that on their Twitter bios, Instagram bios. It's not a thing. You don't get passed down this. I don't believe you get passed down this
special gene.
Special entrepreneur gene is just not a thing. Sorry, it just isn't, right?
I think risk appetite is, though.
Yeah, risk appetite.
I don't know, but then we get into nature versus nurture, don't we?
Yeah, it's true. I didn't have any, entrepreneurs in the true sense. Didn't have any around me. My dad was, self-employed for a chunk growing up. I kind of, as one of my investors say, eat what you kill, right? He would go himself, find work, do the work, get paid, put food on the table. So for a chunk, he worked for himself, which is cool. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there was this kind of, hey, I'm surrounded by these business builders. Wasn't actually a thing. But I think just being hyper curious is something, right? And there's something in just being curious. There's also something in freedom of being in control of the money you make and what you do every day is a strong feeling for me that I want to do. I think that plays a part.
You'd definitely rather have that than the stability of a mundane corporate job at IBM where you have to put a tie around your neck every day.
Hating that big fan. And I think just I tried a lot of things, right? I don't know how many businesses I tried to start, a lot, but trying, and there's no better feeling to this day than just something that was in my brain not that long ago turning into someone spending their own money because they like it. And when it boils down to that, it doesn't matter if I was selling headphones that I bought in bulk when I was like 18, or a Dream Factory membership, or whatever it might be. You still feel so good. It's really addictive.
That sense of pride, it's exciting.
Sure.
But not always glamorous. I read about your £3 profit business.
Yeah.
I didn't know about the headphones. That's a cool one. But tell us about this £3 profit business.
Yeah, not my proudest moment. No, but all these stuff, right? But I love cars, obsessed with cars and all things automotive, and I came across an opportunity to buy, that's so stupid, but to buy like eco-friendly, and this is probably like 12 or 13 years ago, eco-friendly car wash solution.
It sounds very ahead of its time.
Yeah, it was, right?
It
Two
sounds
ahead
great.
of its time.
Yeah.
It's basically, you could go in, multi-story car parks, you have no drainage in them sometimes, and you can't have a big car wash in them, but this was like you spray it on the car, you wipe it off, and the car is clean. I thought that's genius. And I printed, 1,000 leaflets or whatever it was, maybe more, and put them in letterboxes. My parents helped me put them in letterboxes around the place, and then forgot the product was Californian, forgot that I actually didn't live in California, and cars have like 3 inches of crap on them and not just dust, and it didn't work. So we ended up getting a call to do one of a big 4x4, and then my dad actually got there to do it because I was working in IBM.
Wow.
And he was like, this spray will not work on this, and he actually drove it to a car wash and then cleaned it and brought it back. I think the profit was £3 on that, and that was it. I was like, well, let's shut this down.
Do you know, I think there's a market opportunity for this one. I think it was too ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Eco-friendly, sustainable.
Yeah, no one gave a shit back then. Yeah.
Relaunch it now in 2023, and let's see if we can make more than £3 profit off of it.
Yeah. If Dream Factory doesn't work out, I'll fall back on that.
We've always got something to fall back onto.
Yeah, exactly.
So part of that, since then, it seems from the outside like you've got a lot better at nailing product market fit, which really, there's so many different terminologies for it. It's essentially that core value proposition. And we mentioned it briefly before about good old-fashioned basic business. And there's been a reckoning in the startup landscape VC funding has dried up. We've got these fantastic case studies of the WeWorks of the world that have actually sold their story more to the VCs than it is to the actual customers.
Mm-hmm.
They've forgotten about actually adding value into the market. So I read about with Dream Factory, which we're coming on to as well. You talk to a bunch of people first, right? Like, is that something that you put that market research ahead of launching? Like, talk through a bit of that process.
Yeah, for sure. I think during lockdown, nothing else to do. And I always had to be surrounded by people all the time. So lockdown's tough, right? You don't get out, you don't meet new people, you don't hang out with people for the first time. That just wasn't a thing for such a long time. So I ended up speaking to people about content because I sat between, founders and content creation. So naturally I could speak to people easily about that. I spoke to hundreds of founders. Why aren't you doing a YouTube series? How come your TikTok content's non-existent? Why are your Instagram photos shot in your kitchen? Why all the time? I spoke to hundreds of founders.
So just to be nitpicky there for a sec, sorry to just jump in, but when you say you spoke to founders, so did you literally
call them a what?
Pick up the buzzer? You actually phoned them because you had these relationships with them from the days of startup?
Yeah, I interviewed thousands. So my phone, and I interviewed thousands worldwide, but mostly it was UK founders. Because I figured if I'm going to do something that's going to be here, I knew I wanted to be in person because I was pacing up and down my flat like a caged animal. I was like, I need to get out and do something. So I knew it was going to be here. So it was mostly London-centric founders. And it was basically them saying, I don't have the money, I don't have the time, or I don't have the expertise. It's one of those three things said hundreds of different ways. And it was so important to do it, right? And I think I knew this business couldn't, I'm not loaded, Sodafan was great, but then when you don't do anything for 2 years, cash you may have dwindled, and I didn't have loads of money to put into this. So if you're taking other people's money, I think Startup Fan was self-funded, right? So you could take a bit more. Well, me personally, I was like, well, let's give this a shot. Let's interview some founders, see can we get some corporate sponsorship, and then kind of roll with the punches and keep going. With this, taking other people's money, have to be sure, right? Had to be sure there was something in it. And it wasn't a load of money I took to launch this, but there's no way I could do it with a clear conscience unless I actually knew people want this.
It's another level of conviction, isn't it? When you're taking other people's money, they're betting on you. So let's break that down then. So you got seed investment to launch Dream Factory, and this was right at the beginning. So this was based on an idea, right? So who did you sell to? How did you go about working out how much you needed? Again, talk through that process on the pre-seed investment.
So initially, I have a big mouth, so I just told everyone about it. I know some people get their ideas and keep them. I just called everyone, hey, this Dream Factory thing. So calling everyone about it, and ended up speaking to a VC, one of the largest VCs in Europe. And they said, this sounds super timely once COVID goes. We want to be a part of it. We could actually fund it, and let's do a joint venture. So they were like, we'll fund it, you run it, and we go 50-50. And I thought this was such a shortcut to winning, right? I was like, one of the biggest VC, I would struggle to even think of being at a dinner table with this person a couple of years ago. Now they want to go in and do a joint venture. And then I called one of my friends, his friend now, back then I didn't, it was the first call. I called him and I said, I have the best news ever. And I was calling to explain the idea, but I kind of went in casual. I was like, oh, actually, I want to talk to you about investment, but I don't need it because it's done. And he was like, well, you'd sent me the calendar invite a day ago, so what's changed? And I told him that, look, this VC wants to do a joint venture. And he's like, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. He's like, they're going to own half your business. You don't even know what it is yet. And I go, yeah, but neither do they, and they're willing to fund it. So, and he just says, the stupidest idea ever. I'll put in a check, raise around the funding, and just get it done, because you'll regret that if you take that cash.
Amazing.
Which he was so right. He was the first check in, and he introduced me to someone else, who introduced me to someone else, and I opened up to my network, and I got the funding, and it was enough to put the keys in the door and twist it. That was it. So I had no runway once the doors were open. But
I love that. And just thinking back to the what's that saying? If you want money, ask for someone's advice. And if you want their advice, ask for money.
Yeah.
Which accidentally kind of happened to you here at the start.
Yeah, it did.
That is fantastic. That's so exciting. Quick fun fact. Did you know that the annual spend on outsourcing and hiring agencies is $900 billion this year alone? That's why I'm so proud to collaborate with 50pros.com, a new and fast-growing platform that connects highly vetted agencies with companies looking for their next marketing partner. If you've ever had to source your own agency before, then you'll know unless you've had a good referral, it can be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. That's why with 50pros.com, they provide you with a curated, vetted, no-noise directory of only the top 50 firms within 50 categories. Head to the link in the show notes, 50pros.com, and I really hope this helps you get it right with your next marketing partner. All right, let's get back to the show. Are you okay sharing how much you got at the start, the seed funding?
Yeah, it was 136K.
And that was based on the lease of this place? Or?
It was like the lease, it was getting some gear, hiring some staff. It was just enough. It was no runway, right?
And so the lesson here is around kind of networking, talking to people.
Well, yeah, I think I was in a unique position that my actual job before was meeting founders, was meeting investors, building those relationships. That was in there, and it was a natural part of it. There's no way I would have raised that money ever in a million years.
Like fresh out the gate.
Oh, not in a million years. If I didn't have that network, no chance.
I think there's something in there, and not for the listeners here as well, is not as black and white as being super extroverted and networking. This obviously worked for Graham. I think actually it's going a level deeper there and thinking about what are your strengths, because we're not all Graham Hussey or Stephanie Melodia. We've all got our own unique qualities and strengths. Play to those and really maximize the opportunities, whichever come your way, and kind of be ready to grab them with two hands when they are. So we're getting into Dream Factory now. So you've got the money and turning the key in the door. You mentioned about getting staff. What was the position of the first member of staff that you hired? Because that first one that you're hiring is crucial. That's a big decision.
Yeah. So when I got the space in Shoreditch, it was not in good shape, to say the least. So, obviously we had to do a build and we had to do a kit out, and the admin was insane. And we had to order a million different things every single day, and orders were missing. And I am the least organized person ever. So I hired an intern to come in and help me, and she was first hire here, Karina. And then she had her, she started, and she's doesn't mince her words, and she's like, "This is pretty cool, but I don't want to do this forever." I was like, "Well, I didn't think you would." And she said her dream was to be a lighting technician for movies and TV. So I was like, that's kind of cool, because she's going to at least be able to help with the studio stuff. And then we hired her, and she's helped. I've told her a million times how much she's helped me in the business. I was drowning at that time, 2 or 3 hours sleep a night, really struggling with it, and she came in 18 or 19 years of age and just absolutely nailed it. And then fast forward 12 months later, she came to tell me she was going to apply for a job, and would I mind giving her a reference, and lying a bit, which I did. And she's now working on Hell's Kitchen, Gordon Ramsay, as a lighting assistant. So it's quite cool how she came in day one saying, "This is what I want to do," and now she's doing it.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that kind of links back to the self-awareness piece with actually hiring somebody that plugs that gap. You self-confess, not the most organized person in the world, so plug that gap. Did you know that you had enough of a runway? Because again, you talk about the responsibility taking external funding, someone else's money. For me, I feel an even greater responsibility when I start hiring people, because they depend their rent, their mortgage, their savings, their pension. It all depends on you. So what was your level of confidence, safety, decision-making frameworks to be things are in a solid enough state to pay someone else's pension?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we had a bit of runway at that stage, not an awful lot, but I had people who we had 25 members of Dream Factory before we had cameras.
Wow.
And if anyone wants a lesson in building a brand and building a startup, that's it. If you have so much conviction in something, that startups who are cash poor believe in your mission enough to pay you for 12 months subscription before you have cameras, you know you have something super solid and really, really strong. And one of the first 25 members, she works at Dream Factory now. And
Wow.
so people having, because she believes in it so much, she was a co-founder of a business now, is helping scale Dream Factory. So point being, I didn't have much runway, but then we had cash coming in before we had cameras. It was a good indication that
That's a very good
things are going to go okay.
I love that. Especially, I'm aware of your early stage funding from the VC side of the fence and those metrics you need to look at in the early stages before you're generating revenue. Some of those things you need to look at to see, is this a good bet? And yeah, some of those signs are so exciting.
Yeah.
You talk as well about the culture that you've developed here at Dream Factory, and actually I've had comments from other members from the outside. I'll be completely honest, I was doing my due diligence a little bit before signing up.
Yeah.
Thinking like, what do you think of it? Is it worth it? And outsiders were like, it's fantastic. Like, everyone there is super helpful. These were genuine comments. I love the smile on your face.
Yeah, it makes you happy. Yeah.
It's so lovely. It's so validating as a founder. Not only have you built something successful, but genuinely in back channels, in private WhatsApp chats with me, people are being like, yeah, it's actually amazing. People here are really helpful. And I've since experienced that as well. So I can feel that culture since joining as a member. What do you attribute that to? Because it's not as, you're doing something obviously fantastic here, but it's not as if it's a charity or, you've got this super saving the world mission that you don't need to have to build it. So what's really got everyone kind of so tight-knit here?
I think everyone has something different. I think if you ask every staff member of Dream Factory, every team member, they'll have something different to say about it. It's genuine authenticity from me. The team know exactly what's going on at all times, and if they don't, they can ask. We genuinely believe that in 5 years' time, if you pick up your phone or open your laptop and you see a piece of business content that's not shot at Dream Factory, that will be strange. and I think the team being a part of that is really important. I think when the time comes and DF goes public or we exit, that the team that work here now and help build the first one in London never have to work again. I think that's an amazing thing, that they can start their own business, they can do passion projects, they can still work at DF. I think that's another part of it, but it's sheer pride. No one sees this because it's internal, but if someone posts this podcast or if someone posts a piece of content they shot on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, it's just pride from the team. Wow, look at this founder who's created this Dream Factory, how amazing. And everyone jumps in the comment and and they absolutely love it. And it's a real special thing. And I don't think I've seen it before where people join Dream Factory and then they have to move on. It's the realities, it's not all, I don't want to give the impression of all these like mad employee pixies come in and they start Dream Factory and everything's perfect. But I think the team are so tight knit, the team are so strong that if someone joins and they don't have that in them, that sheer pride in what they do, they don't last. They don't last. Because me as a founder, I would back myself against any other founder in the world to do a business like this. And I think each team member would back themselves to do what they do versus anyone else in the world, right? I think that sheer pride plays a huge part in it.
Yeah, I love that. It must feel, how does it feel for you being sat here? You're now the founder of a super successful business. You've got 30 staff and growing, multiple locations. How many members you're up to now?
350, yeah.
Compared to not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, where you were sat in creepy murder vibes.
Yeah.
What's the main sort of difference that you kind of feel between like here and there, then and now?
I think to be honest, I think the biggest difference is people have my back now. Right? It's having a team and a mission and a vision and be all on that path together makes me, I don't know, makes you feel proud, makes me feel, that's the biggest difference, right? I think, and it's a lesson, and I say it's to founder friends of mine. Back then, if we had, 11 months runway in the bank, it was like, wow, it's 11 months runway, we can relax a bit, it's 11 months runway, versus, me saying, well, let's hire 2 people. That runway will go down to X amount of months, but then we have 2 people to help us scale and grow, and people who have our back. So it was kind of over-indexing on, oh, we're okay, we'll survive for 11 months, versus let's hire people and go for it and make something of this. So the biggest difference is having that, I walk in on a Monday morning meeting and there's all those people there who were just good to go that week.
Amazing.
That's a really good feeling. Yeah.
That sense of like traction or scaling, is that what you mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's going to, that's going to bring challenges. We're going to launch New York for the end of the year. And to bring that there, I've a plan which I think, I hope will work. To be able to have the energy that's here there, because anybody listening to this can get a camera or 2 and some lights and some mics and put it in a room. Anyone can do that. Dream Factory is a very different thing. And the last thing I want is to launch a Dream Factory in the city and it's just lights and cameras and mics in a room. That's not a Dream Factory. That's going to that's the next scale of that's the next challenge that we're going to face. But the whole team is ready for it, and they don't back down from anything. It's the maddest thing ever. Yeah,
it's the essence of a brand that you describe, and obviously more my world. But brand is more than just a logo. It is that feeling, that sense. As you say, anyone can come in and put these materials in place, but actually there's something that's intangible, but it doesn't mean that it's any less important, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The one thing that Startup Van and Dream Factory do have in common is the personal brand element. So you've built businesses that have enabled founders to tell their stories. Was that something that, again, you did kind of consciously, or was that very much just looking at how can I add value in the market? Where's the gap?
I just wanted to hear the stories.
Your own curiosity.
I just wanted to hear the stories. And
I can relate to that, yeah.
And then I'd hear the stories directly, and it would be absolutely incredible. And then I would see a piece of content that they post or a blog it's not even 1% of the passion that I heard face to face. I was like, if you could just bottle your actual ambition and passion and let people drink out of it, it's a different story than a poorly written blog post, because founders aren't writers most of the time. It was just wanting to hear the stories and feeling like they deserve people to feel that passion like I feel if I talk directly to them. And that's basically where it came from. And then you roll with it, right? And then opportunity comes up, you grab it with both hands, you maximize it, you do your best, and you keep going. And that's, I always say, it kind of feels like I'm wading through snow, 4 foot of snow, and it's 1 foot in front of the other all the time. And then you end up here on this podcast.
I love that. Well, final question. I'm super grateful for your time and sharing your open and honest stories. It's so interesting, but this wouldn't be called the Strategy and Tragedy podcast without sharing a tragedy. I do believe that some of the best lessons come from our biggest mistakes. So can you share one of the biggest tragedies that's happened to you and the big lesson that you took away from that?
So but just before the beginning of lockdown, with Startup Van, we signed a big multinational company. One of it is Volkswagen. So one of the biggest companies in the world were going to pay us to travel to 40 cities in 12 months. Crazy amount of money, total freedom to do what we wanted. And we signed that and kind of just went, well, that's great, and where in reality, looking back, we probably should have got other brands and other projects and add some on, versus just kind of go, well, we signed this big thing, that's great. And then when lockdown hit, it was kind of a punch in the face of, wow, this is, you're watching Boris Johnson on TV saying we're all going to die, and it's that was a strange thing. And then you get that second punch in the face, which is Volkswagen saying that's not happening. And that was big, because obviously we told everyone, right? And this is the thing, I think, with founders, you tell everyone everything because I think it's a coping mechanism, right? You have to deal with so much crap all the time and so much stress. If something good happens, maybe it's just me, but it's a coping mechanism of saying this thing's great, and then you tell so many people, and then that's a punch in the face of it's actually not happening.
It's almost like a naive optimism, isn't it? It's that positivity. You say, the coping mechanism is you got to believe it's going to work out. You got to believe that the best case scenario is going to be the outcome of this. So yeah, that's completely understandable.
That's one of the biggest differences I see between successful founders and founders who aren't so successful, is that blind optimism. Has to be. Any founder I know that's great is just, this will work. And it won't stop until it works. Versus before, you know, people are on paper, maybe even in real life, way smarter than I am, will open up a spreadsheet and go, won't work because of this. Right? And I know so many people who spreadsheet themselves totally out of an idea versus following gut, speaking to people, doing your research and executing on it is a big difference. So that was like really hard to deal with. Because you're dealing with lockdown, which the whole world's dealing with. But then you're dealing with a personal, it felt like a failure, felt like, and even though it's COVID, no one can help it. It was like, oh no, I failed at something. I failed at this.
So did that lead to the demise of startup?
Yeah, big time. Yeah. Because then it was like, do we do stuff online? But that's not quite the same. And obviously everyone started piling on online to do Zoom interviews, and launching podcasts and then it was, we spend so much time and money making sure we're elevated and we're better and we're different, to then playing fields just leveled. So it felt a bit strange. But that was like business tragedy. That's it. But
then like a phoenix from the ashes, uprose Dream Factory. Sure. So
and I look back at how hard that was then, really difficult to deal with. And I think friends of mine, that weren't founders, this is bad to say, but they were loving it. They were just like, we get to work from home and I'm getting paid and having a good time sometimes, or obviously it was hard times. But then it was me saying, oh, well, like this X amount of money contract has just been pulled. I don't have a job really. And it's a big crash, right? It's gone from on paper, and in reality, travel the world interviewing founders, get paid for it, to small apartment in Shoreditch, no job, contract pulled.
But it was a global pandemic that drove that to happen.
Yeah. But you know what's crazy? That just like sums up.
Feel like a failure.
That sums up how mad the mind, your mind is, because global pandemic, no one could do anything about it, and I still lay awake. Used to lay awake at night going, I've messed that up. So any founder out there is listening to this thinking that they failed at something, and more often than not, it's something that, in a year's time, you realize you learned something from it, which you didn't realize at the time.
Yeah.
And I learned that with Dream Factory, multiple revenue streams at all times.
Yeah.
No eggs in one basket, which I think was an issue back then. Multiple revenue streams. We do new memberships. We have lucky enough to be in business long enough to have renewals. We have editing revenue. We have ad revenue. It's that lesson learned, and I'll never forget it. And we sit down in Monday meetings, it's like revenue streams.
Yeah.
Revenue streams, safety nets, runway. And it's a big lesson. That's a tragedy, if you want to put it that way. But it's the lesson learned through it. The lesson learned is invaluable.
Well, I'm very glad to hear it. Otherwise, of course, we would not be sat here today. So I'm very pleased about that particular tragedy. Graham, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure hearing your story, and very grateful for, again, your openness. And congratulations again. I'm looking forward to world domination.
Thanks for having me.
If you made it this far into the podcast, then you are my new hero. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, please hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to me. Thank you so much. Take care.